Hey guys, it's Celestia, and Wacom, arguably the world's most reputable and well-known drawing tablet company, has messed up enough that I'm reviving art news to talk about it. I never really officially discontinued art news as a segment on the channel, but I did kind of gradually just stop covering what's been going on in the art community for a few different reasons over time. The biggest one by far is that as AI continues to grow, improve, and worm its way into every corner of the art world, the only big news to cover is about AI, and it's always bad. There's only so many ways I can say this company used AI exploitatively to replace human artists before my entire channel just becomes a doom-scrolling nightmare of inescapable negativity. It's bad enough that AI is taking over the entirety of the art community. I do not want it to take over the entirety of my channel too. The news is important to talk about and keep up with, but especially after you guys expressed that you were sick of hearing about AI art updates when it's all overwhelmingly depressing and repetitive, I decided that for the most part, I don't want my channel to become too focused on that news. I'll still cover significant developments within the community, of course, like today's, but giving updates on which company exploited artists with AI this week, when that's basically just expected of companies at this point, doesn't seem like a productive use of my platform. But as it turns out, in this case, this instance of a company exploiting artists with AI is uniquely notable because digging into it further reveals a larger issue within the community than you might first expect. And that's exactly why I feel it deserves its own video. So here we are. If you somehow haven't heard of them, Wacom or Wacom, I've heard it pronounced both ways, but I don't actually know which one's right, so I'm going with Wacom, and to anyone who pronounces it the other way, enjoy cringing for the rest of the video, because I'm going to be saying it a lot. Wacom is one of the first and largest drawing tablet manufacturers, and in the early days of digital art, they effectively had a monopoly over the tablet market. When drawing tablets first became available to the general public, the only reputable, trusted manufacturer of them was Wacom. From Bamboo to Intuos to Cintiq, if you had a drawing tablet, it was probably Wacom. Over the years, as cheaper options with similar quality from other brands became more widely recognized, that monopoly was lost, and artists these days have many more options available to them when it comes to choosing a tablet. Even so, Wacom is still an industry giant in the art world, one that claims to support artists and human creativity around the world, something that only makes recent events even more egregious. Now, like I said, companies using AI art deceptively and exploitatively in their products or promotional materials is nothing new. It's hard to look anywhere online without seeing yet another headline about a publisher using undisclosed AI art as a book cover, an animation studio using AI rather than animators, or Wizards of the Coast using AI on an ad campaign after saying they wouldn't. I would have to make a video a day to cover them all, and since it's basically become an expectation rather than a surprise when it happens, I don't think that's an effective use of my time, and I wouldn't be making this one now if that was all that happened. Unfortunately for us and Wacom, it wasn't. On January 2nd, Wacom released these promotional campaign images to promote their New Year's sale, even boldly going so far as to include them in their Twitter header. This was widely regarded as the worst possible move, because upon closer inspection, or just any inspection at all, the art of the dragons that was included was very obviously AI generated. Now, like I said, while it's infuriating and unacceptable, it's by no means uncommon to see this happen. Companies are outed all the time for using AI in promotional materials, something that's either done openly or without disclosure, both of which generally face well-earned scrutiny. But this isn't any company. It's an art tablet company. They're trying to sell their art product to digital artists with promotional images made by the thing that's doing its best to make those artists obsolete. There's a level of betrayal to that just goes one step further than it would have had it been any other company. Wacom has been the backbone of the digital art industry for decades, with artists investing thousands upon thousands of hard-earned dollars into their products over the years. They've claimed to be advocates for creativity and supporters of human artists, and they've most definitely profited massively off of them. On a moral level, that makes the use of generative AI instead of a human-made illustration even more reprehensible, something that has rightfully sparked a huge wave of outrage from the community that is more than understandable. As one Twitter user said, "Don't use a product that is attempting to replace us to sell us tools." The irony of that was almost comedically bad, with other users making gems like this, and others too stating, "A brand like Wacom using AI art in their ads is like a car brand telling their customers that everyone is better off using the train." And that brings me to something that genuinely confuses me. The goal of generative AI is to replace human artists, the ones buying Wacom's products, the ones that will stop buying Wacom's products if we're made obsolete. They stand to lose their livelihoods just as much as artists do if AI image generation's prevalence continues to grow, so you would think they would be more vigilant than anyone to avoid contributing to it. I understand corporate greed, motivating companies to cut corners and use free AI art rather than paying artists. I expect businesses to kick morals to the curb if it means they'll make a buck, but Wacom Wacom doesn't stand to make a buck here. They stand to lose everything, just like us artists if we're made redundant by AI. And yet here they are, using it as a replacement for an artist. The only thing I can think of is that they sincerely thought they wouldn't get caught, which based on the quality of these images just seems thoroughly unbelievable to me. But there might be an explanation for this, and we'll get into that later, because it's what separates this incident from similar ones from other tablet companies. XPPen and UG were both caught using AI-generated images and promotional materials, both of whom apologized and cited that they outsourced the art and were unaware that it was AI-generated, and both of whom were able to move on from the situation with nowhere near the amount of backlash Wacom is facing now. Some of that, I'm sure, can be partially attributed to the fact that Wacom is simply a bigger, more reputable tablet manufacturer, and is subsequently subject to closer scrutiny. But I think a lot of it is also because of some key information that's about to be revealed. In the face of all this backlash, Wacom deleted the posts and changed their header back to normal without saying a word, staying quiet for days before finally releasing a statement on January 9th acknowledging the situation. And I do say statement and not apology very particularly because they didn't actually apologize at all. The statement reads, "Dear Wacom community, you have pointed out to us that we may have incorporated AI-generated images into our New Year's marketing assets. We hear your concerns and questions. We know you are upset that it has taken us so long to address the situation. We needed time to investigate and get the facts right. We want to assure you that using AI-generated images in these assets was not our intent. Here's what happened. Wacom purchased these images through a third-party vendor where it was indicated that they were not AI-generated. We vetted the images through a few popular online tools that also indicated that they were not AI-generated. However, given the community's feedback, we are now not sure how the images were created. For this reason, we immediately discontinued their use. We are very grateful to be part of the creative community, and we appreciate your feedback and collective knowledge in this field, and for holding us accountable. As a partner for artists around the world, Wacom supports human creativity and strives to serve the community with integrity. We are reviewing and updating our processes so that we can avoid this happening again. Thank you for hearing us out. Sincerely, the Wacom team." Now, this statement was not well received, and that's for a few reasons. One, Wacom is claiming that they did their absolute best to vet the images as not being AI-generated. And as TikToker James Joyce confirms, the images do indeed pass analysis by common tools as likely human-made. The problem is that those tools are notoriously unreliable and do not provide a 100% accurate assessment of whether or not an image is AI-generated, instead offering what's effectively an educated guess. And yeah, okay, but that's the best they can do, right? If the best tools available aren't completely effective at detecting AI art, then if they used them and they were ineffective, what else could they have done? And the answer is, look at the images for a full minute. The fact that these passed any kind of quality control is baffling, not just to me, but to thousands within the community. This tail isn't attached to anything. You can still see the white from the original image that they didn't crop out. The teeth are in incomprehensible clumps. The scales follow unnatural patterns. Shapes don't attach to each other. Anyone could look at these and see that they're AI generated based on one cursory glance, evidenced clearly by the fact that everyone did pretty much immediately after they were released. Yes, Wacom very well could have vetted these images with AI detection tools, but the fact that this massive company with a dedicated marketing team and their whole reputation on the line if they're caught using AI failed to actually look at the images used and recognize the glaringly obvious AI mistakes suggests negligence to a truly unbelievable, inexcusable degree. A regular company would be expected to notice errors this severe, but a company literally built on art and having a knowledge of art and a sensitivity towards the significance of AI generation within the community, that's just egregious. But the second criticism Wacom is facing as a result of their statement pertains more to the fact that within the statement, they admit that these images were never commissioned from artists at all, but rather licensed as stock images from a third party. While most people acknowledge that in a corporate setting, the use of stock images in promotional materials is exceedingly commonplace, they argue that Wacom, a company selling a tool with which to make digital art, should be advertising that tool with art made by digital artists. They feel that it's disingenuous of them to promote a tool for digital artists to make art with without hiring one to make the art for the promotion, especially when they have a community of skilled and passionate artists that would have loved the opportunity to do so. And in fairness, to play devil's advocate, stock art is still art, and it's still made by an artist. It wasn't in this case, but they ostensibly thought it was when they used it, if we're gonna take their word for that, which I'm hesitant to do and lean more towards the belief that they did notice and thought no one else would, but that's not the point. The point is that stock art is still digital art made by an artist, and that's worth considering. But what's also worth considering is that number one, the scale is vastly different in terms of compensation and effort. Wacom claims to support human artists, but rather than supporting one enough to actually commission them with reasonable rates and consideration put into their hiring, they chose to support one enough to pay them a few cents for a pre-made generic image. They were only willing to support an artist to the smallest possible degree. The other point to be made is that by making art the primary focus of their promotional materials, they are directly or indirectly using that art as an advertisement of their product. When you buy a car based on the way it it handles in an ad, you expect your car to handle like the one in the ad. When you buy a tablet based on the art you see in its ad, you expect the art to be a representation of what can be created on that tablet. So to not even commission an artist to create a piece of art using the tablet feels inherently deceptive, especially when they used to. Wacom hired Loish to create illustrations for their tablet boxes, something that was very well received by the community and showed that at least back then, they actually did support artists enough to hire them. One could argue that hiring an artist to illustrate packaging that they'll use on a massive scale commercially for years is different than hiring one to create promotional material that'll be used once. And I would agree. But look at their usual promotional material and tell me that by comparison, this promotion wasn't directly intended to be separate from it and stand out by way of the art's inclusion alone. This was a campaign that was specifically designed to stand out from their normal marketing because it included art as such a major focus, and was even used as their header as something that was representative of their brand, presumably for long-term use. So I don't think it would be unreasonable to compare this to their collaboration with Loish, given how large-scale this campaign actually seemed to be and how much of it relied on the art it featured. And many agree, not just on the technical level of how significant the art was and how important it would have been for them to hire an artist, but also when it comes to how it's interpreted emotionally and personally. This Twitter user mentions that when they saw the Loish art on their tablet boxes, they remember feeling a longing, not just to own a Wacom tablet, but to be an artist like Loish. And by comparison, art like this, created by a machine, falls dramatically short, feeling more like penny pinching than inspiration. Now, all of this is already scummy, but as I mentioned earlier, that's not where it ends. There's another layer to this that presents a much scarier problem than corporate greed. I know, I too was surprised there was something scarier than that. Earlier, I referenced a TikToker by the name of James Joyce. Well, he actually found the quote-unquote artist who created one of the AI-generated dragons that Wacom used, confirming that the third party they purchased it from was Adobe stock. James goes through the artist's entire stock library, and it's abundantly clear to even the most untrained eye that the entirety of their work is AI-generated. One glance at it would make that undeniably obvious. Now, number one, this points to further negligence on Wacom's behalf. They put so little effort into vetting the artist that they clearly didn't even look at the rest of their work, because if they had, they would have known beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was AI-generated. But number two is much more concerning. They're not entirely to blame, because Adobe stock allows you the ability to filter out images created with generative AI, and this person's entire library of work was marked as human-made, AI-free. Yes, decent judgment and common sense would have made it obvious to Wacom that that's not true, but it's important to acknowledge that when they searched for art to license, they were, presumably, searching through results that they believed, under Adobe's assurance, were not AI-generated. Whether they should have been licensing stock images for this project or not in the first place is up to you to decide, and they definitely should have known by looking at it that it was AI-generated, but we absolutely need to be understanding of the fact that they were specifically, presumably, looking for art that wasn't AI-generated using a filter that assured them that the search results wouldn't be. When I said earlier that I found it unbelievable that a company with so much to lose if caught using AI would take that risk, this is what I meant when I said there might be an explanation for that. They sincerely believed that based on Adobe's filter, there was no chance that anything they licensed from them would be AI-generated, so they may have been influenced by the presumed legitimacy of Adobe's assurances when judging the art's reputability. If Adobe tells them with confidence that something wasn't made with AI, there is an argument to be made that perhaps they did see the mistakes in it that suggested AI's use, but ignored them because of the confidence that they had in Adobe's designation of it as human-made. Which means that while Wacom is by no means blameless here based on all of the other issues I've already discussed, Adobe's own negligence seems to be massively more to blame for this situation than people are acknowledging. It is alarmingly easy to submit art to Adobe stock and just check a simple box that says you made it without AI, meaning that to filter out images generated by AI on Adobe stock is really just to take the word of every artist submitting them. Obviously, there are limits to how responsible Adobe can actually be for guaranteeing the authenticity of these images. As we've established, the tools available to detect the use of AI aren't 100% effective, even if they did use them on every piece submitted, which I doubt they do. Don't take my word on that, I don't know. But they could at least try, and they could be proactive in terms of having a dedicated team actively reviewing the libraries of artists submitting large quantities of work like this one, especially when so much of it is obviously similar and undeniably AI-generated en masse. It's massively irresponsible on their part not to have any system in place to do so, and it not only leaves anyone purchasing from them open to the risk of unknowingly purchasing AI art, but it leaves Adobe themselves open to legal consequences for assuring their customers of the human-made authenticity of art that isn't in fact human-made at all. And that's why I'm making a video on this incident in particular, because the background of it is vastly more nuanced than people realize, and it brings light to a much wider-reaching issue. Even the most reputable sources of stock art like Adobe have almost no systems in place to verify whether or not an image is AI-generated beyond the artist's own claims. And if that isn't rectified soon, Wacom might just be the first in a long line of companies to end up in controversies like this. The artist, you know what? No, I don't want to call them an artist. The person with a keyboard that made this dragon and the plethora of other AI-generated stock images is no longer on Adobe stock, suggesting that they either deleted their account or Adobe removed them. But as of writing this, we can't know for sure one way or the other. Hopefully, Adobe did remove them for breaking terms of service and will use this as a moment to learn from and improve their system in the future. But I'm not holding my breath. In conclusion, where do we go from here? Should you boycott Wacom forever and stop buying their products, or should you accept their commitment to doing better in the future? That's completely up to you. Art news isn't about making those assessments, but informing you on what happened so you can make them yourself. Personally, I think this shows that Wacom was lazy, unprofessional, disingenuous, and cheap, and should have hired an artist in the first place if they really did support artists and creativity as they claimed, in my opinion. But I don't think they deliberately sought out AI as an alternative to human artists. I think they just paid the price for being cheap. I'm honestly much more worried about Adobe and their lack of quality control, and think more attention needs to be brought to that instead. I can only hope that this is a learning moment for them, and they take the detection of AI in their library much more seriously, but only time will tell. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, TC Pratt, Art of Amethyst Fable, Zelda Deverak 42, Abyss Reborn, Haruki Kyle, and King Good James, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, Cora Fear, Jamisha Walker, Elengshi, Kim Yen, Crazy Asar, Gentong, Grayson Xavier, MG, Blah Mage, TC Pratt, Finn, Grim Spectre, Celine Merriman, Ash, Eldritchia, The Stray Dog, Allura, Greg Noble, Decagon, Jenny Chan, Captain Reku, Ryan M. Williams, Catbus, Alec Reinekainen, Mac, Lucy Yamajiki, and Nelatonin, and I'll see you in the next one.